I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess, and today I have my November TBR for you. I read 8 books this November, and 2 of those were for an event I was participating in, Nonfiction November, which is hosted by Olive from A Book Olive. Thank you so much to her for hosting. I didn't really even pay attention to what the prompts were this year, and I don't know if anything that I have counted for them, but that's fine. I just, read a few things that I was gonna read anyway and called it participating because it is. So let's jump in. The first book that I read was one of my Nonfiction November reads. This is The Professor is In, The Essential Guide to Turning Your PhD into a Job by Karen Kelsky. Wow, this was really helpful. I wish that this had been given to me like the year before I went into my PhD program. They should definitely be giving this out to everybody who goes into a PhD program, because this was so helpful for thinking about what you should be doing during your degree to push forward your career. Because honestly, a lot of PhD students, myself included, don't get told this information until we're in our 4th or 5th years. And by then it's kind of too late if we're wanting to go right onto the job market. It was incredibly helpful. Sometimes Kelsky's tone is a little bit, well, angry, and she admits to that. And like, I get why. Sometimes it's a little off-putting, but honestly, the usefulness of all this information outweighed that by so much for me. So this was a 5-star read for me. Probably my favorite book of the month, actually, just because of how utterly helpful it is. Next up, we have, actually, the next 2 books are Kindle books. First is Wolfsong by TJ Klune. This is a paranormal werewolf romance, and I have very mixed feelings about it. I ultimately gave it 3 stars because I was very engaged and interested. However, the pacing is very strange, and I don't think it entirely worked. It covers a very long span of time that I don't think was entirely necessary. But the kind of biggest part that was an issue is the age gap in the romance. So the 2 romantic interests meet when they are, one is 16 and the other is 10. And nothing happens until they're adults, or until the 10-year-old isn't a, but I never really got over it. I never got over it. Like, it was always there, and I was like, he was 10 when they met. Ah. And I really just didn't feel that it was necessary. I felt like he could have maybe been aged up to 13, and it would have been fine. So that was definitely a choice on Klune's part. It was not my favorite. Again, I did really enjoy reading it. It took me a while to get used to the writing style, but I do get what Klune was going for. So not my favorite. I'm not going to be continuing with the series, but I did enjoy it, so I gave it 3 stars. Another romance, and this one's a dark romance. This is Lovely Bad Things by Trisha Wolfe. This is about a woman who is kind of a consultant on FBI serial killer cases, and the serial killer that she helped put away, and how she has to work with him on a new case. And if you're like, that sounds familiar, yeah, it's because it's Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter. And that's why I picked this up. A booktuber that I enjoy, who recently just returned to BookTube, Kate File, was reading this. And she was like, it's just Will Graham, Hannibal Lecter fan fiction, but made Kate straight. I was like, okay, I want to try it. And I really enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. I had some issues with it, but ultimately it was a really good time. I read it in a single day and I had fun. I had a lot of fun. So yeah, if you are a fan of Hannibal and want some romance that is just basically Will and Hannibal, but a guy and a girl instead of two guys, this is a good choice. It is a series, there's 2 more. I will be continuing with it. Yeah, good time. Oh geez, the next one's a Kindle book too. And to be fair, I did have a physical copy of this available to me, but it was from the 1800s. I was kind of afraid it was going to fall apart in my hands. This is Brother Jacob by George Eliot. This was my read for the George Eliot Project for November, and it was the least successful one so far. I gave this 2 stars. I have a whole video, so I'm not going to say much more. It's also a short story, so the video gives away everything because it's a short story. But yeah, not at all my favorite, my least favorite by her. My least favorite by her. Next up, we have another 5-star read, and this is Deathless by Catherine M. Valente. Yes, I finally finished it. I started this in September, then took off October for Victober, and then got back to it really more toward the end of November, honestly. And it wasn't because I didn't like it, because I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, but I don't know. This is a retelling of Koshchei the Deathless, which is a Russian fairy tale. It is about a girl named Maria Morevna who is living in St. Petersburg during the Russian Revolution. And I just absolutely love what Valente did with this fairy tale. I wish that I was more knowledgeable about Russian folklore and Russian history, because I think I would have gotten more out of it if I was. So that's like something that I think I'll probably brush up on in the next few years and then return to this so that I can enjoy it even more. But I love what she did here. It's so much fun. It's dark, it's creepy, it's disturbing, it's weirdly romantic in some ways. It's just great. And I love what she says in the acknowledgements about her husband, who is Russian. And he was acting as a human English-Russian dictionary and font of priceless details. He first read her the story of Maria Morevna and Koshchei the Deathless, leading to that immortal question, wait, what? Why is he chained up in her basement? Yes. If you haven't read Koshchei the Deathless, I highly recommend reading this fairy tale. It is wild. Wild. And this was so good. Highly recommend. Go read The Death of Koshchei the Deathless and then read Deathless and just enjoy yourself. It's a good time. Next up was one that was lent to me by a friend. This is The Plot by Jean Hance Korelitz. I actually had started this a few months ago on audiobook, and turns out got more than halfway through and then like fell out of the mood for it. But my friend lent it to me and I finally got around to reading it. So I reread the first half and then finished it. I had a lot of fun with this. This is about a man named Jake who is teaching in an MFA program. He's kind of like a failed author. He's published 2 books. His first one kind of made a splash, and then after that, nothing. And he meets this student, Evan, who is like kind of belligerent. He's kind of a jerk. He doesn't like want to share in workshops because he's afraid that somebody's going to steal his idea. But Jake gets him to tell him, like, because Evan's like, this book is going to be great. No matter who wrote it, it would be amazing. And it's going to be like a bestseller on Oprah, and there's going to be a film, and it's going to be by a big name director. And Jake's like, yeah, sure. Okay. What's this great plot? So Jake finally gets Evan to tell him, and Jake's like, oh my God, that's the best plot ever. It's completely new and different. And then Evan dies without publishing it. So Jake's like, well, it would be a shame for this plot to just not ever see the light of day. So he writes it. He does not plagiarize. He does not use any of the actual writing that Evan did, but he takes the idea and makes it his own. And then after his book has become a smash hit, somebody starts emailing him saying, I know what you did. I know the book's not yours. And so he's trying to figure out, who is this that's now harassing me? And through that, kind of uncovers the history of Evan's family. Like I said, I really enjoyed this. I did figure out one of the twists pretty early on, but that was fine with me. And honestly, that was because I had read the first more than half of it before. I didn't figure it out that first time I was reading it. I figured it out the second time while I was like, oh. I will say I'm not convinced that the plot is like this huge, big original thing that has never been done before. However, it was really good and I enjoyed the story. I enjoyed the characters and I enjoyed the ride, kind of, you know. So yeah, definitely recommend, 4 stars. Next up is my other nonfiction November read. This is The Equivocal Virtue, Mrs. Oliphant and the Victorian Literary Marketplace by Vanita and Robert A. Colby. So this is part biography, part critical study of Oliphant's works, and really focusing in on her relationships with her publishers and how she moved within the Victorian literary market. And I complained about this in my currently reading. These two are the most condescending people ever. They're both dead now. I looked it up because I was like, okay, I want to fight them. And they were both dead, so I can't fight them, but I will say that they are incredibly condescending about Oliphant. Just like to an uncomfortable level, honestly. Like, ugh. I gave this 2 stars, however, it did give me a lot to work with for my dissertation because a big part of my dissertation is critics being condescending toward these women writers and claiming that they wrote too much, which is something that they literally say in the preface about Margaret Oliphant. So it gave me a lot to work with. It was kind of hard to read though, because, yeah, so 2 stars. Wouldn't recommend reading it unless you're an Oliphant scholar and then it's useful to you, but definitely if you want a biography of Margaret Oliphant, read Elizabeth Jay's. She is so much more respectful, and yeah. And the last book that I read for November, I did put on my TBR for it as a possibility. This is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. You know what? I never thought I would reread this. This came out in 2020, I think. Like, what a weird year. So this is Twilight written from Edward's perspective. And since I had just read reread the Twilight Saga and did my whole video on rereading it as an adult, I was kind of like, I kind of want to revisit Midnight Sun again. Even though after I read it in 2020, I was like, I will never read this again. Like, I enjoyed it, but I'm never going to read it again. And I was like, no, I think I'll read it again. And like, honestly, before the halfway point, I was like, oh, I remember why I never wanted to read this again. Edward is insufferable. This man is so angsty. Like, I get it. You're a self-hating vampire. Just shut up. Oh my God. This book is 600 and something pages, whereas the original Twilight was like 400 and something. Oh my God. And it's just all him being so self-hating and angsty. And I'm like, I can't deal with you. However, it's definitely a better written book than any of the other Twilight books. Definitely better than Breaking Dawn, but that doesn't take much. And it is really fun because with Edward, we get to see everybody else's thoughts. So we get a little glimpse into everybody else's head. We get a lot of the interactions between the Cullens and the relationships between them, which is fun because they're the most interesting characters in the book. Like, Bella's not that interesting. And we also get more character development on Bella, honestly. We get more description of her. So it's definitely interesting. I still had fun with it, but my God, it's too long. Too too long. I ended up giving it 3 stars. For a while, I was thinking 2.5, but I decided to stick with my original rating of 3 stars because I did enjoy it. It's just too long. Just needed an editor and to make Edward shut up. My God. Like, there's angsty and then there's Edward Cullen. Ugh. So yeah, 3 stars. I wouldn't recommend ever reading this unless you were a big fan of the original series. Oh, those are the 8 books that I read in November. Let me know down in the comments below. Have you read any of them? What did you think? What did you read in November? It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.